Hey guys, today we're going to talk about rational exponents. That's when your exponent is a fraction. So we're going to use all the same rules that we've already learned, except now we're going to be just either adding or multiplying or subtracting fractions. So if you're struggling with that, you have a calculator that can help you out. Okay, so there is one new thing. I'm going to show you how to write a rational exponent as a radical, okay, and that should be the only really new thing we do today. Okay, on number 1, I have x to the 1/4 times x to the 1/4. I have x's multiplied by other exponents. So I know when that's the case, I'm going to take my exponents and add them together. So I'm going to have x, if I don't know, and you type it in, 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1/2. Okay, so this little star out here, some of them were, like here we have two variables, x and y. I'll probably only pick one, the x or the y, to show you how else you can write it. So right here I have a fraction that is an exponent, so I'm going to show you how to write that as a radical. So I'm going to draw my radical, and I'm going to put my base of x on the inside. Alright, I called this guy my little pedestal. So on the pedestal, I'm going to put the denominator of my fraction. So my bottom number is a 2, so on that little pedestal, I'm going to put a 2. My numerator, the top number, I'm going to keep on the inside with my x. So x to the 1/2 can also be written like this. So this is really the only new part. Okay, so on this one, I know I'm going to do my constants first, the big regular numbers, and then I'll deal with my variables alphabetical order. Okay, so 5 and 2, it's telling me to multiply. 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, I have x's here, I have x's here, so I'm going to add those together. So I take a 2/3 and I add a 1/3, that's going to give me 1. So I'm going to have x to the first power. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my y's. Pick a different color. I'm going to go ahead and write down my y. If I take 4/5 and I add 2/5, that's going to give me 6/5. Okay, I know this one really isn't necessary, so my final answer is 10x y to the 6/5. Okay, just for practice out to the side, how can I write y to the 6/5 as a radical? So I'm going to draw my radical, put y on the inside. Remember, the denominator, the bottom number, I'm going to put on the pedestal. The top number, my numerator, I'm going to stick on the inside with my y. So just remember, this can be rewritten like this. Main thing to remember is the bottom number goes out here on the pedestal. The top number stays on the inside. Okay, so on this one, I see that I have an exponent on the outside. I have to give that exponent to everything on the inside, starting with this 2. So the biggest mistake is that people say that this is 2 times 6. Well, that's not the case. This is a 2 with a 6 exponent. So next I give it to the a. Well, a already has an exponent. So I know that this little parenthesis reminds me to multiply. And I'm going to take this 6 and multiply it by 1/2. 6 times 1/2 is 3. Now I have to give it to b. b already has an exponent. So I take this 6 and I multiply it by 2/3. 6 times 2/3 is a 4. I do not want to leave my answer this way because I have 2 to the 6th power. Remember, we write parentheses. Parentheses are important. So if I type in my calculator 2 in parentheses raised to the 6th power, I get 64. So it's not the same as 2 times 6. Big difference. Okay, neither one of my exponents are fractions, so I cannot rewrite them as a radical. Okay, on this one, I have my exponent on the outside, which means I have to give it to everything on the inside, starting with this 27. So I have 27 in parentheses, and I give it the exponent of 1/3. Remember, it's not the same as 27 times 1/3. Remember that. Okay, next I have to give it to C. Notice C already has one, so I multiply. 1/3 times 6 is 2. And then finally I have to give it to D, which it already has one as well. So I take 1/3 times -3, that gives me a -1. All right, I have to simplify two things here. The first thing I have to simplify is 27 to the 1/3 power. The other thing I have to simplify is I have a negative exponent. Okay, well, first of all, 27 to the 1/3 power is what you should do first. So 27 in parentheses raised to the 1/3 power is 3. Next, I see my C. It says C to the second power. There has no negative, no warning on it, so I'm going to leave it alone. So I'm going to leave C squared on top. Okay, so remember your D. Let me rewrite that. I don't like the way it looks. Your D has a negative exponent. So remember, we're going to use this negative as a warning sign telling me, hey, I'm here, but I don't really belong here. So I'm going to move this D to the bottom. And remember, when you move it, the negative goes away. So instead of a -1, it's going to become a +1. All right, so my final answer will be 3C squared all over D because the one exponent is unnecessary. Okay, so I see x's on top and I see x's on bottom. So we know the rule when we're dividing variables with exponent is find the bigger exponent. So I know 5/8 is bigger than 1/8. So I know my x belongs on top because it has the bigger exponent. And when it's on top and bottom, we subtract. So I take the big number, and we're going to subtract. So if you need to, you could type in 5/8 subtract 1/8, and that's going to give you 1/2. There is nothing left on the bottom, so that is my answer. All right, let's practice rewriting that because I see a fraction exponent. So I'm going to make my radical, put x on the inside. Remember, this denominator goes out here on the pedestal. The top number of 1 is going to stay on the inside with the x. So these are the same thing, just rewritten in different forms. Okay, so on this one, I see x's on top and on bottom. Well, I know that 1/2 is bigger than 1/3, so I know my x's belong on top. Since it's on top and bottom, I know the rule is to subtract. So if I take a 1/2 and I subtract a 1/3, that's going to give me that's going to give me 1/6. Okay, so if I took 1/2 and I subtracted 1/3, that gives me 1/6. There's nothing left on the bottom. So there's my final answer. All right, let's practice rewriting that. How would I write x to the 1/6 power as a radical? So I put my x on the inside. Remember, your denominator, your bottom number, goes out on the pedestal. Your numerator, your top number, is going to stay on the inside. So these are exact same thing, just written in different forms. All right, on 7, I see x's on top and on bottom. So first I have to decide where the bigger exponent is. Well, 4/5 is bigger than 1/5, so my x belongs on the bottom. And when it's on top and bottom, I know the rule is to subtract. So I'm going to take the big one, which is 4/5, and subtract 1/5. It's going to give me 3/5. So when there's nothing left on top, remember I fill it in with the 1. So let's practice rewriting this guy. On top I had a 1. On the bottom, I had a fraction of an exponent, so I'm going to change it into a radical. So I know the denominator goes out on the pedestal. My numerator, the top number 3, is going to stay on the inside. Okay, before I begin this one, I see my y right here. I see that it does not have an exponent, so I'm going to go ahead and fill in my 1. It's just a good habit to have. So first I have a 2 on top, a 3 on bottom. That's 2 divided by 3, 2/3. If you're not sure, you can always type in 2 divided by 3 in your calculator to see if it simplifies to a smaller fraction, which it does not. So I'm going to leave it as 2/3. Okay, next I look at my x's. I see x's on top. I see x's on bottom. Well, I know that 5/8 is bigger, so x belongs on the bottom. And I know I need to subtract. So I take a 5/8 and I subtract a 1/8. That's going to give me 1/2. And then I do the same thing with y's. I have y's on top and on bottom. 1, so think about it, 1 whole pi is bigger than 3/4 of a pi. So 1 is bigger, so y belongs on the bottom. And again, I subtract. I'm going to take 1, subtract 3/4. That's going to give me 1/4. Okay, just for practice, I'm not going to change both of those, but I am going to practice changing y to the 1/4 power. So how would that look as a radical? So I'm going to put my y on the inside of my radical. Remember, the denominator, the bottom number, goes out on the pedestal. The numerator, the top number, stays on the inside. Okay, so I'm going to do my constants first, and then I'm going to work through the alphabet. So first I have a 10/2, 10 divided by 2, which does simplify. 10 divided by 2 simplifies to 5. Oh, don't forget, let's go ahead and fill in my 1 on my x and my y. I see x's on top, I see x's on bottom. 1 is bigger than 1/4, so I know x belongs on the top. When it's on top and bottom, I know the rule is to subtract. So I'm going to take 1, subtract 1/4, and that's going to give me 3/4. I see y's on top and bottom. I know 1 is bigger than 2/3, so y goes on top. And I subtract. 1 minus 2/3 is 1/3. There's nothing left on the bottom, so this is my final answer. Okay, I want to practice changing y to the 3/4 power into a radical. So I put my y on the inside of the radical. Remember, your denominator, your bottom number, goes out on the pedestal. Your numerator, your top number, stays on the inside. So let's do constants, and then we'll work through the alphabet. So first of all, I see an 18 divided by 2. 18/2 does simplify to 9. Next, I see x's on top and I see x's on bottom, but before I do anything with subtraction, I see that we have a negative exponent, which is a warning. That's telling me that this x really doesn't want to belong where it's at, so I need to move it. So since it was on the top, I want to move it to the bottom. When you move it to where it belongs, remember the negative falls off, so now it's a positive 3/5. But I can't forget about this x. It didn't have a warning, so it belongs on the bottom. So I know x to the 1/5 is on the bottom. Then I do my y's. I see y's on top and bottom, but before I worry about subtraction, I see another warning. So this y was on top with the warning me that it doesn't want to be up there, so I need to move that y to the bottom. So when I move it, the negative drops off, so it's going to be y to the positive 5/8. But I can't forget about this y. It has no warning, so it wants to be on the bottom. Okay, if you did this step, I would be very proud of you, but I would not be able to count it correct because it's not entirely simplified yet. You see how we have x's here and here, y's here and here. So not entirely simplified. So let's finish. Well, the only thing on top is my 9, so I have a 9 on top. I have x's here and here on the bottom. So I know x is the only place x is on the bottom, so that's where it goes. But when I have x's here and here, both on the bottom, and I'm multiplying by more x's, remember the rule is to add these together. So I'm going to take this 3 over 5, and I'm going to add 1 over 5, and that's going to give me 4 over 5. Okay, I see y's here and here. They're both on the bottom, so I know y's belong on the bottom. So what I need to do is I need to take my exponent here of 5 over 8 and add my exponent here of 1 over 8. So if I take a 5 over 8 and I add a 1 over 8, it's going to give me y to the 3/4. Okay, this is my final answer. But what I would like to practice is let's change x to the 4/5 into a radical. So I put x on the inside. I put my denominator of 5 on the pedestal. I put my numerator of 4 on the inside. Okay, on number 11, I see that I have x's on top and on bottom with no warnings, so I look for the bigger exponent. Well, I know that 2/3 is bigger than 1/3, so x belongs on the top. And when it's on top and bottom, I know that the rule is to subtract, so I'm going to take 2/3 and subtract 1/3. That's going to give me 1/3. Nothing left on the bottom, so that's my final answer. All right, let's practice. Changing x to the 1/3 into a radical. So I put x inside my radical. I'm going to put my denominator, the bottom number of 3, on the pedestal, the numerator of 1 on the inside. Okay, I see x is on top and bottom with no warning, so I look for the bigger one. I know that 4 over 5 is bigger than 2 over 5, so I know my x belongs on top. When it's on top and bottom, I know the rule is to subtract, so I take 4 over 5 and I subtract 2 over 5 to give me 2 over 5. There's nothing left on the bottom, so I'm going to just go ahead. That's my final answer, and let's practice turning that into a radical. So I put my x on the inside of the radical. I'm going to put my denominator, the bottom number of 5, out on the pedestal. My numerator of 2 on the inside with the x. Okay, we're going to just finish these last problems up. We're going to stop practicing changing it into a radical. Okay, so I see x is on top and bottom, no warnings. I know 3 over 8 is bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and put my x on top. I know when it's on top and bottom, I know I subtract. So I'm going to take 3 over 8, subtract 1 over 8. That's going to give me 1/4. Oops. Okay, I see y is on top and bottom. I know 7 over 8 is bigger than 3 over 8, so my y belongs on top. And I subtract. I take 7 over 8, subtract 3 over 8. That's going to give me 1/2. And I'm done. So I could change this into a radical. I could change this one into a radical because I see their exponents are fractions, but we're going to stop with that for now. Okay, 14 throws people off. It looks big and scary, but if we just take it step by step, it's not that bad. It's telling me to take this piece right here and multiply by this piece right here. So step by step, I'm going to look at my constants, the regular numbers first, and then work through the alphabet. So -3 and 5, it's telling me to multiply. -3 times 5 is -15. Okay, I see I have x's here, and I'm multiplying by other x's here, so I know that rule is to take these guys and to add. So I'm going to write my x down. If I type in negative 3 over 4 and I add 1/4, that's going to give me a negative 1/2. And then I need to do the same thing with my y's. So I'm going to go ahead and write y down. So I have 5 over 4, and I'm going to add negative 1/2, and that's going to give me a positive 3/4. Beautiful. All right, but the thing is I cannot leave my answer written this way because I see a warning. So remember what that warning is telling me. Look at that X on top. It's warning me it really doesn't want to belong up there, so I need to move it where it belongs. Okay, a common mistake I see is that this 15 has a negative on it and people try to move it. Negative exponents are warning, not a negative constant, so that negative 15 stays where it's at, which is on top. This X is warning me to move, so I'm going to move X to the bottom. When you move it, the negative drops off. And my Y I'm going to leave alone. It's happy on top. Okay, on 15, I see an exponent on the outside of the parentheses, which means it belongs to everything on the inside, starting with that 8. Okay, remember that is not 8 times 1/3. It is 8 to the 1/3 power. So now that I gave it to 8, I need to give it to x, which already has an exponent, so I multiply. 1/3 times 6 is 2. Now I have to give it to this y, which already has an exponent, so I multiply. 1/3 times 12 is 4. Beautiful. But I cannot leave my answer this way because I need to simplify 8 in parentheses to the 1/3 power. That's going to give me a 2. So my final answer is 2x squared y to the 4th. Last one is very similar. Notice we have an exponent on the outside of parentheses, so it belongs to everything on the inside. The first thing I need to give it to is that 144, so I put 144 in parentheses, and I give it the 1/2 exponent. Remember, that does not mean 144 times 1/2, way different. So now I give it to x, which already has one, so I multiply. 1/2 times 8 is 4. Next, I give it to y, which already has an exponent, so I multiply. 1/2 times 12 is 6. All I have left to do is to simplify this piece right here. So 144 in parentheses raised to the 1/2 power is 12. So my final answer is 12, x to the 4th, y to the 6th.